Anything I can help with or answer? Any questions? Anything of that nature?
So I'm curious to know about your social media presence in China.
Okay.
Because I was listening to one of your talks and you said that Weibo is actually the fastest growing channel of yours at the moment. So just.
So of course. So I have a presence on Weibo and WeChat, and let's see if I can pull it up. And I'm also doing quite a bit with a Facebook Chinese page that is actually growing ridiculously well. And so, in general, it's not sounded. In general, to me, I think about things in 30 and 40 kind of year windows, and the thought of not having a presence in mainland China is almost like not existing in that kind of window. And so I'm doing KOL collaborations with people who are trying to build a presence in the US or the rest of the world. And obviously, two core things that I speak a lot about: entrepreneurship and really, I would call it family dynamics of psychology of like what 20 to 30 year olds go through, are clearly over-indexing subject matters for a lot of mainland Chinese youthful entrepreneurs, and so it's really, really growing very rapidly.
I was also listening to your YouTube video about how in your 20s you should just really explore and not to be too risk averse. And I mean, obviously I've grown up in Finland, but I've received a very sort of traditional Chinese, not education, but the way that
point
I
of
was
view.
brought up. So, I mean, that's something I don't think that in mainland China anyone's ever said to those kids that, you should
I don't think they've said it in the US either, or Europe for that matter. And it's interesting, right? Like I think about it in two ways. I think there's two ways to win your 20s. I think you either go all in and like work your face off and build that foundation, or you go completely in the other direction and you go higher risk, higher reward to try to just figure yourself out and taste a lot of different things. I mean, it actually isn't logical or practical the way that we're all brought up and like how we're supposed to address 22 to 30. It's supposed to be like, okay, go attack and like settle it down and build a foundation. It just doesn't, it had a lot more merit when people lived to 50 years old. It just doesn't, it doesn't have as much merit in the way the world is today and the opportunities that are gifted. I mean, I think a lot of the things I think about challenge conventional wisdom, because what I think I tend to do is layer the reality of the current world and not just think what used to work in a pre-internet industrial revolution, 1960s, 70s, 80s world.
I'm thinking about tips for us. I think that we have to be like renewing ourselves every day on social, and as every other company too. And we're doing campaigns, we're doing inspirational content and so on. But what are the tips, like from your perspective? What should we be doing and how do you see like commercial campaigns on social?
So the thing that I think will make sense to you guys is that I think that a company, like a little homework for this meeting, I think they get fragmented too much, meaning in social, it is either things like day in and day out content to fill the pipes, which is aspirational and nice, and maybe spending too much time worrying about engagement and not enough time about what the business results are. And then they spend a lot of money on outdoor and television and traditional branding. To me, the biggest opportunity in social is doing brand work inside of Facebook. To me, the number one thing I would do if I took over marketing is I would produce, 50-second to 4-minute videos for Facebook with the intent of brand and sales.
Not long videos.
Long videos.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think
the reason for that? Because
they work.
But we have seen that like people that shorter videos seem to work. So.
Shorter videos work for the vanity metrics of social media and the way you kind of judge, shareability or consumption. But when you look at actual attribution to a transaction or the ability to, let's play it out. Okay, so you make a 20-second video on Facebook, it gets, let's say it gets 100,000 engaged, liked, shared, commented, and then you run a 2-minute, 19-second video that has a lot more breadth to like what you're about. That one may have 17,000 people watch it. It may cost you more money on media to get 17,000 to engage than the 100,000, but when you go to retarget those 17,000 versus the 100,000 to buy, the math tends to work out on the smaller, deeper group than the wider, shorter group. And so I think that what's great about being unlike being a bottled water company is when they go to retarget, they're still a retailer and they can't see all the math.
Yeah.
For you, when you retarget, it's black and white. You'll be able to see the CAC and the LTV on the transaction that you're looking for. And so I think the biggest mistake a lot of big companies make is they do social media for the sake of social media, not for the sake of the actual business goals they have. And they don't hold traditional dollars they spend to the level of accountability that they do in the new world, because the new world has so much more metrics. You have no idea if there's 3-second or 10-second viewability on your commercials. You don't know the impressions of your outdoor. You've accepted it because it's always been done, but you hold the new stuff to a level of scrutiny that you don't the old stuff. So to me, that's where the big miss is for.
How do you see like very tactical advertisement in social media? Should those be done, or should it be just more like brand and
I think both work.
Yeah.
I think branding and selling work. I mean, there's enormous amounts of selling to be done on Facebook. I think you can't be half pregnant. I think a lot of people try to hide sales into branding and vice versa. I think there's a lack of a good conversation between the difference between a piece of content that's meant for branding and one that's meant for sales. And I think most organizations over-index in respecting one or the other. You have some companies that only don't like social media because all they want to do is actually be DR marketers, and that's why they favor Google. And then you have other people who don't value social media because all they want to do is brand work, and they think television or sponsorships are better brand work. And that's why social, and specifically Facebook, has this incredible opportunity right now, because it's underpriced attention, because not enough money's going into it either from DR or brand. Yet, if you look at Wish, if you look at so many other companies, they do their marketing and their selling, Purple Mattress, many other companies, Lola, in that environment. That's why I'm so bullish on it. The issue is, like anything, the ROI of these two markers is completely predicated on my talent to draw with these two markers. And I think that, there's a sophistication, both mathematically and artistically and strategically and psychologically, that it takes to be good at any marketing in any medium. And I think most people are applying old principles into this new environment, which is why they're not getting the results. To your point, this bottled water company would rather put something like, a hashtag Wednesday wisdom post, because they're going to get 87 likes on the post, without really understanding if that's going to lead to selling here. I think there's a lack of thoughtfulness in most people's, overall overall marketing strategy, digital strategy, and then social strategy.
When you were looking at our Facebook site, what did you think?
What I couldn't tell, what I was looking for more was how much marketing you were doing actually in a traditional world. When I was looking at Facebook, the biggest thing that I don't know is, are you running Facebook ads that I don't see on your, which I would hope you are, and more importantly is far more important than what I would see. I was less analyzing your social. I was more trying to get a sense of how much traditional media you were doing in the name of branding. Because as I've just said earlier, the number one thing I would do if I were you is do much more branding inside of Facebook. That to me is the, I would argue the unique point of view by comparison to most right now that I think has the most upside.
Did you have do you have what do you think about bots and artificial intelligence now that it's like talked a lot, and we know that many like has been taking those like bots very seriously. They have been doing good work inside Messenger and so on. We aren't there yet. We have a like bot called.
You need to get there.
It's taking baby steps. So
you need to get. You're going to get caught if you fall behind too much because all of your customer service is going to happen through that environment.
Yeah.
You're going to save a fortune.
Yeah.
It's going to be better, more efficient, higher conversion, and lower cost.
Yeah.
You need to be serious about Messenger. And I think when you look at mainland China, the US, VK and Russia, the AI message bot infrastructure is going to be very important. Yeah. Consumers will interact with those bots because they're going to get time saving.
Yeah, that is true.
It's going to take time.
Yeah.
It's going to take 2 or 3 years for it to be the behavior that I think a lot of technologists are looking for. Yeah. But I mean, I'm a very big fan of it. It will be there.
How do you see like social? Should it be in-house or should it be out? Is there like...
I think everything should be in-house, which is funny considering what I do for a living. I think what I've learned is that most companies aren't the reason they don't do in-house is 2 reasons. One, strictly from a Wall Street or publicly traded company standpoint, they don't want the expenses on their P&L, which hurts them in public markets. Or 2, they just don't retain the talent, and they feel like they lose that continuity. To me, anything you can do in-house is always going to be interesting, unless there's somebody who's hungry enough. The way I would, if I owned a company, the way I would play agencies is I would work with independent shops who are on their way to try to sell to holding companies because they're going to care more. They're just different. So I think the biggest issues with agencies and with brands is agencies are publicly held companies. So much consolidation that.
And they don't love our brand like we do. Like we kind of see it that when
I think that's right, but I also think what agencies do well, including others, is they're able to see your brand in a different way than you are.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks their kids are the prettiest.
Yeah.
So I think that's where they can bring sensibility. My biggest problem with agencies is they don't produce enough work for the cost associated.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're really kind of winning. Is first of all, I've built the agency mainly to buy brands. So I have far more ambition to become my clients than to be an agency, which aligns our interests better. And what we realized after we got great at media was, oh my God, we have to produce so much content to take advantage of the media landscape. So we built our own 50,000 square foot production facility and have had a much deeper religion on the cost of creative than I think the market has been accustomed to, without giving up this magical idea of quality. When I first got into the business, I came from startup land and entrepreneur land in Silicon Valley, and I would look at a video at a commercial, and I literally was like, how the hell does this cost $600,000? I just couldn't get there. So I think our great ambition, so our model is if you're a brand that does a commercial and it costs $800,000 in out-of-pocket and creative and production, we try to convince that client to do 6 or 5 or 4 or 3 long-form Facebook videos for that same cost, which can first fit different demographics, right? Because when you do one commercial, it's just vanilla. Yeah. Whereas, if you start an Asian, family in their 20s and target Asian American or Europeans in their 20s, you're gonna over-index in relevance. And then we also think the media costs on distribution are more efficient. Because I think the biggest conversation that you also probably wanna have on the media front is there's potential reach and then there's actual reach. And I think the market trades on potential and doesn't layer common sense. I mean, there's almost no market left in the world that OTT hasn't eaten up such a substantial percentage of television content consumption that it's made every commercial reared grossly overpriced.
At least here in if you think about the influencer landscape, we're seeing the same faces everywhere.
Well, it's a small market.
Yeah, endorsing the
over and over.
everything.
Yeah, I think to your point, one thing I did look at, and I had a meetup last night with 4 of the 10 faces. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be left desired in influencer marketing, but I think that's where you probably want to look at the global nature of your business and look at the pockets where you can play, or using those same faces in other markets. So I do think they're inexpensive. So I do think what's interesting about your 10 faces is in a US-centric campaign with that kind of level of YouTube, which is really what we're seeing following, there probably is an inexpensive way to do some very clever collaborations where you might be able to take those 4 to 10, do some sort of collab with 2 or 3 US-centric. In the US, there's something I think that would really work for you, which is family vlogging is very big. And some of it can get pretty affluent. But, and I could see a lot of interesting collabs of like that family going to, there's something to be done that I think you could hack. So I think if you're thinking for this market, your domestic market, I would say how underpriced Facebook and Instagram ads are is probably the strategy I would deploy. If I thought about the influencer market, I would use them as ambassadors on the outside. Because what's great about YouTube is this, so let me play it out for you. You take a YouTuber with 600,000 subscribers, he's still cheap. Like you can probably give him a couple of pumped, or fine, a little bit of bucks. But in the ecosystem of YouTube, if there's people with 1 million subscribers in the US, the idea to do a collaboration with him is exciting because they want to siphon fans from him. So he's more valuable as an asset out there. You see where I'm going? And this is what I was talking about with thoughtfulness. I think the level of sophistication and the way that people fragment all these different things, and that's why I think we've invested so much in strategy. Our biggest growth has been, so we used to meet somebody like you, and if we wanted to do business, we're like, okay, you can give us your media budget, you can give us your creative budget. And I think the thing that we've realized in the last couple of years is, or for a 150,000 euro strategy thing, we can save clients millions of dollars with their creative and media partners, and it's a good way to get the value out of us. So I think even how we're talking now, that would have been how we probably would have analyzed your influencer strategy. Go use their following count to do collaborations in other markets with bigger influencers who are trying to siphon, and use them as a gateway, as an ambassador to your brand through that collaboration. To me, it's unemotional assets versus costs, right? So for me, I'm not in love with Facebook and Instagram, I'm in love with the price of their ads.